everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell. It is Tuesday, and that means it's time to talk some Major League Soccer. We've got Supporter Shield candidates, we've got teams rounding into form, and we've got teams who are doing very much the opposite of either of those first two things. We're going to talk it all out, analyze some teams that have been eliminated from the playoffs, and take a look back at the weekend that was. To do so, I'm joined by a man who knows that all Sporting Kansas City needs to return to past glories is a chief soccer officer and a new manager and maybe new players and maybe new, better designated players and fan enthusiasm and possibly just a lot of other stuff. Joe Lowry, a simple fix in Sporting Kansas City.
I mean, Taylor, you basically just did the whole section on Sporting Kansas City that we're going to do later. I think that was an excellent summary of a lot of the things that need to happen there. There's a lot of work to do for Sporting Kansas City, who made the LA Galaxy, the 2025 LA Galaxy, over the weekend, look a lot like the 2024 LA Galaxy. They lost that game 4-1 in Carson in what could end up being something of a spoon decider. I mean, that's where the real drama is. It's in the spoon race this year. Everybody knows that. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in that game on Saturday where Joseph Paintel's back scoring a hat trick. I mean, it's just like 2024 all over again for the Galaxy for just that sweet 90 minutes against SKC.
Yeah. I was listening to the SoccerWise episode in which Tom and Goss were like drafting teams that have been eliminated and which ones they would most want, which ones they would want to deal with. And I enjoyed Tom essentially making that same argument, basically like, if they figure out the CSO and it's somebody who we think it is, and they do this and that and this and that and this and that and spend some money, then fans maybe will be interested. There's a lot of conditionals getting Sporting Kansas City back to where they would like to be. I don't know if there's as many conditionals for St. Louis. But I do know that joining us is a man who knows that anytime you can hire a manager who stands at odds with your overarching philosophy and style, you have to do it. What could go wrong? It's Jeff Ruder. Hello, Jeff.
It's the yin and yang theory, right? It's the idea that you can never have too much of a good thing. And
yes.
I think, honestly, maybe what it is there's no sports documentary where it's like our season, everyone was in cahoots, on the same page, and we won the title, and it was excellent. Like, I think everyone's just trying to create this adversity, you know? Like, without the promotion and relegation, you need to find your own ways to create this sorts of stakes, and so what you do is you hire a coach who apparently doesn't like the CSO. Who knew?
That always goes well.
Right.
Yes, so we're going to be looking at a few teams that are now out of playoff contention. That'll be later on in the show. Right now, Joe Lowry, shall we talk Supporter Shield race? And I think really what I would say to teams that are in search of the Shield, want to contend for that top spot, I think a good way to do it is to always play DC United. I feel like that's a very nice way to cement your legacy top of the table.
I mean, that's really, Taylor, the ultimate MLS hack. If you can get in good with the MLS schedule makers and just get DC United for 34 games. You can even play those 34 games in DC for all I care. Just play them 34 times. That Shield is going to be yours. The Philadelphia Union, everything came up Philadelphia this weekend until we got some unpleasant news about Quinn Sullivan tearing his ACL. Just yesterday is when that came out, and Quinn Sullivan announced that he had, in fact, torn his ACL early on in that game against DC. Before that, and I do want to get back to that, but before we get to that, everything was coming up Philly. So here's the chronological order of events that led to Philadelphia basically having an entire hand on the Shield. As things stand right now, they're on top of the Shield race. On Saturday afternoon, because we're back to having that afternoon game now that we're through a good chunk of the summer. On Saturday afternoon, Miami traveled up to Toronto and drew that game. They dropped points, which put Philadelphia back in control of the Shield race, because now Miami, even with their games in hand, cannot claw level on points with Philly, assuming both of those teams went out. So that was a huge result for Philadelphia, because Miami, it seemed like maybe we're actually going to do the thing and go and win all the rest of the games that they had on their schedule. That is now no longer the case. Then Philadelphia drop a touchdown on DC United in a 6-0 win. And then throughout the rest of the weekend, Vancouver dropped points in a 2-2 draw with Seattle. Cincinnati on Sunday, I'm out of chronological order now. Cincinnati on Sunday, they ended up drawing 1-1 with Orlando City. And San Diego also on Saturday. There we go. There's my faux pas. They did not win either. They lost 1-0 to San Jose at home. So all of the teams trailing Philadelphia dropped points. They did not. They scored 6 goals. They were far, far better, to state the obvious, than DC United. The only black mark on the weekend that was for Philly is that Quinn Sullivan ACL.
How big of a black mark is that going to be, Jeff? How big of a loss will Quinn Sullivan be for the Union heading into the playoffs and beyond?
Yeah, I think, incredibly impactful, because I think that Quinn Sullivan was the player this year. Last year, he was a bit more of a goal scorer, but this year he was working really well under Bradley Carnell as sort of that like quick twitch facilitator, someone who is really good at making the right decision efficiently and effectively to keep the ball moving at the rate Carnell wants his team to play, but still set his teammates up for scoring opportunities. I mean, was so huge for Ty Baribo's, early season standouts, and for many other players as well, to have Quinn Sullivan in the hole. There's also the fact that they sold Daniel Gazdag, and I know that we've talked this year about Daniel Gazdag not being the same impact player, but usually, much like other teams who have decided to sell players in the middle of the season, like the Pedro Vite conversation we had about Vancouver before Thomas Muller came in. It was like, okay, well, so how are you going to fix that on such short notice when you get rid of your best player, even if you're doing a system change? Well, it's a system change, but Gazdag coming in could have been that alternative to try to get by and, keep the floor from falling out, even if they have to change their style of play a little bit, which Carnell hasn't really shown want to do with either St. Louis or Philly. So, I think that it is substantial. The one thing that's still in Philly's favor is that their game model isn't predicated on individual players. It's on the collective. And so you would assume, whether it is his brother, whether it is someone else who's coming in and kind of eating up a lion's share of those minutes, there could be an opportunity for them to, show that they've been paying attention in training and committing these reps to heart and are able to integrate seamlessly. This is one of those things that Philly does better than most clubs, is have a ready-made replacement in the wings. So time will tell. Like Joe laid out so perfectly, they at least have a little bit of cushion again. If the Shield is the aim, or the first of the aims, I guess you would say, in the season, in the short run-up to MLS Cup. But it'll sting. And I think that they will struggle in the run of play more without Quinn Sullivan there.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. I love how you phrased it as this quick twitch facilitator. I think that's what you said. I think that describes Sullivan's game so well. He has ended up being their right-sided chance creator, where Kai Wagner is the best chance-creating left back in Major League Soccer. He is one of the best creators, period, in MLS with his service into the box. Sullivan has almost this Julian Gressel-esque cross on him with that right foot. He is someone that balances out a little bit of what Sullivan does on that side. Though we have seen him, a little bit of what Wagner does on that side. Yeah. We've also seen Sullivan roam across the width of the field, right? So it's not just that he's always going to be providing that service from one side or the other, but now they lose their second best playmaker, effectively, right? That's a huge concern. It is not, I don't think, a season-ending sort of concern, where Philadelphia, the Shield is a separate conversation to this point because we're so close to the end of the season. This is now about MLS Cup for Philly. I think they've still got the quality to go out there and make a deep run. The East is a gauntlet regardless, but I don't think Quinn Sullivan is the deciding factor of what Philly's season ends up looking like, especially because they went out in the summer window and signed Milan Olaski, who was the one who moved into the attacking midfield over the weekend when Sullivan went down injured. He drops back a line, and all of a sudden Olaski is the one playing the pass before the pass, and he looks quite good. A very different way of interpreting that attacking midfield role than Sullivan. But they have quality. Like, I don't think that the sheer drop-off in just overall talent level from a Sullivan, maybe you say Sullivan and Vasilev in the attacking midfield spots and then two of the strikers. I don't think it's that different from Vasilev and Olaski and then two of the strikers. I think in general, Philly have the depth to deal with a move like this. But don't get me wrong, it makes them worse. I just don't think this is going to be totally debilitating for them when it comes time for MLS Cup.
Yeah.
How much of a statement opportunity is the next game against NYCFC, where they could, I believe, lock up the Shield? NYCFC, for their part, have won 4 of their last 5. So, too, have the Union. Do we feel like this is the one where the Union secures the Supporter Shield? Jeff or Joe, whomever feels the strongest. Jump
Joe,
on.
you take the Philly side of it, and I'll take
Sure.
the NYC.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Philly, this is absolutely a possibility for them to go out there and win the rest of the way. NYCFC are a really good team. I won't say more than that to not take Jeff's thunder. But Philadelphia have been legitimately the best team in MLS this season. Like, their consistency has been so impressive. They have every chance to go out there and get 3 points and then to do it one more time as well before the season ends. I would not bet against Philly at this stage. Am I willing to say that absolutely conclusively there is not one more windy, bendy segment of the Supporter Shield racetrack? No, I'm not. Like, it's been an entire season of twists and turns when it comes to pursuing the Shield. But Philadelphia are the odds-on favorite to get it done, and I expect that they will.
New York will pose tricky, right? And I think that they're a team that's ramping up at the right time. When you look at their schedule, even going back just to when Nico Fernandez debuted, which was on the 25th of July, and that's really when it kind of changed to the current iteration. They've won 7 of 9, right? So resistance is futile against them, but their losses have been against Miami and DC squarely, but the Miami one was 4-0, and that's one that kind of gave us pause about thinking about them as a serious contender. Well, look at some of the teams that they have beaten this run. 2-0 win over Charlotte to end their record-tying streak. 3-2 over Columbus, 3-1 over Chicago, 1-0 at Cincinnati, 2-1 versus Nashville. Like, look, these are a lot of one-goal wins, but good teams have to win those games. But that's a lot of wins against teams that we're talking about as being either MLS Cup contenders like Nashville and Cincinnati, or teams that, have really ramped up this year and become very difficult to play against, like Chicago and Charlotte. So, it really is a shame about their stadium situation, right? Because I think that we've overlooked the fact that they've been one of the most nimble and consistently competitive teams in Major League Soccer since Patrick Vieira stepped in, right? And that goes to Dome Torrent, that goes to Ronnie Dyla. Atlanta fans won't want to hear anything of that, and we'll have much worse things to say about him in the second or third segment. Nick Cushing then kind of carries the baton, and then Pascal Janssen right now. But throughout these, you have reinventions, and New York City just keeps coming back and keeps regenerating and has more young talent, but also now is making the kinds of signings that the Red Bulls aren't. And you can kind of see that in contrast over the weekend when they win the Hudson River Derby 3-2. I don't think that there's really an excuse for the Red Bulls to be operating this way. I know that I'm just ramping up Joe for another one of the New York Red Bulls are an unserious club moments, but there's just you see the success, you see the regenerative factors like about NYCFC. You see Alonso Martinez, like maybe not quite Toddy, but he's got the aura, as the kids say. He's definitely like one of the most of all the teams in Major League Soccer. Let's just say the top 10 teams right now, he's one of the strikers I'm most confident can step up in the biggest games right now. And I think that having that in-form guy is so valuable. Could be a little early with Philly. Matt Freese left the game with an injury, which means he's officially the U.S. starter if he's missing games with injury now. But hopefully he's able to recover from his head injury in time for the playoffs, but it might come a bit too soon for this Philly game. So we'll see about that, but it's been really, really good for New York City, especially since Nico Fernandez stepped in.
So we're definitely buying stock in the Union and their playoff aspirations, also Supporter Shield aspirations. Seems like we're all a little bit positive, or at least you two are a little bit positive about NYCFC. Joe, any other teams you feel like are sort of rounding into form at the right time? Shall we talk Chicago yet again?
Yeah, they totally fit into this category. They beat the Columbus Crew 2-0 in their game on Saturday. Chicago are not just going to make the playoffs this year, breaking their playoff absence streak, but they are a team that I think could actually maybe kind of sort of cause some teams some problems. Things have been bleak in the Windy City for quite some time now. I don't think that's new information to anybody. You go through and look at the season finishes for Chicago, and just to really lay this out, the Chicago Fire haven't qualified for the postseason since 2018. They've qualified just once since 2013. They've qualified just twice since 2009. That is like 2 decades ago. If you want to look at it in terms of like 0 and then the other number, or 1, then the other number, then 2, and then the other number. It's been absurd how bad the Fire have been. MLS is set up to make it almost impossible to do what the Chicago Fire have done. So I suppose my hat's off to you, Chicago, that you managed to be that bad for that long. Greg Berhalter, though, was hired over the offseason to change that, obviously. He's given the keys to the kingdom on the sporting side of the club. He's allowed to make the kinds of decisions that MLS teams in the modern era haven't allowed one person to make. Yes, I understand. He makes lots of hires in the front office, and you build out a staff and all those things. Greg Berhalter is not the only one poring over Y-Scout to scout players and all that stuff. But he's given the keys to the kingdom in a way that we just don't see. And really, it's paid off. Even in an Eastern Conference that has been so good this year. Sure, the Fire have finished on basically the bottom of the good teams. But they have struck form at the right time. Berhalter has brought in the right pieces, I think, for them to become a serviceable MLS team, if not a giant. And there's more room for them to wiggle next season, right? And not to look too far down the road. They can still add one more DP, and you can bet that they will at some point before too long. And even in the short term, I think there are some reasons for optimism for Chicago. I mentioned they beat the Crew 2-0 over the weekend. Berhalter in the last 2 games has shifted away from that 4-3-3. He's now started to use a 3-4-3 because they've been bad defensively this season. It's paid off. 3-0 win over Minnesota, and the first time they used that shape from the jump all season long, and then a 2-0 win over Columbus. I think Berhalter's pulling the right strings. And when I look at this Fire team, Andre Franco making an impact in the double pivot in midfield after joining in the summer window, there aren't a lot of... let me put it this way. I would not be thrilled about facing the Fire in the postseason, even if they end up winning that wild card game, and you're thinking, oh, I'm the 1 seed, it shouldn't be a problem to deal with the wild card. I think the East is different this year. I think the Fire have the one-game ability to beat just about anybody. They also have the ability to be trounced by anybody as well, because defensively they've been that open this year. But I got a lot of stock in what the Fire are building, maybe less so in the short term and more in the medium term. But man, I don't think they would be a team I'd be thrilled about facing in the playoffs.
How strong is the midfield partnership they have with Diavila and Franco? Because I was obviously like Sergio Orahel's only hype man at the beginning of the season. I feel like I was like overly enthusiastic about him. Shocking that I would get hyped up about a team I was previewing. Kellen Acosta, I thought, could also still do a lot of work for this team and has, but it feels like that midfield duo has become critical to what the Fire want to do and how they want to play.
Yeah, and it's not. Oh, sorry, Jeff. Go.
No, I think it took time because I think that they assumed Acosta would be that guy, right? And he was like a marquee addition. One of the first major additions after Berhalter signed on was bring Kellen Acosta. And the idea was that you had an MLS Cup winning whatever role he was going to play, right? Like you probably wouldn't want him to be your dedicated ball winner, but you wouldn't want him to be your kind of further advanced. But there's if you have a 3-man midfield, which Berhalter always plays, there's a role for Kellen Acosta. And Kellen showed that with an extended run out with the U.S. men's national team as well, that he has familiarity with his tactics. Well, Kellen Acosta hasn't been the Kellen Acosta we've been used to over the last decade this season. And so I think it just took time where Berhalter was having to figure out, okay, Kellen is healthy this week. We've got to get him some minutes because I want to get him integrated because I think that he's part of my A team. And if it just isn't coming, eventually you look for alternatives. And maybe that's what happens where you're eventually able to kind of settle on the current pairing that's working so well. There's also a team structure difference where you have an extra defender coming in. And so, the midfield role looks a little bit different, maybe a little bit less stay back and a little bit more proactive, which will suit the strengths of the current players. So I think that it is viable. You do have a lot of teams in the East that do play with 3-man midfield, so there's a chance that they will get passed around, and like Joe said, that could stretch them out tremendously. This is a team that has both scored 7 goals and conceded 7 goals this season. You can't say that about many teams terribly often. So, I think at this point, that last weekend, that might have been the preview of the play-in game. Yeah. Just to be frank, like between Columbus and Chicago, we might be seeing that one again. I don't think any of us expected Columbus to fall off in as big a way, but I don't think if any of us expected they would still be looking for a Kucha replacement into the summer. And the injuries have just been relentless for them too, to be fair. But I think Chicago is legit, and I think that they've at a minimum, this should be a return to the postseason and a very, very firm foothold to go even higher in 2026.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about a few more teams that are finding form at the right time and maybe a few teams that are doing the opposite. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody, to the Total Soccer Show. Joe Lowry. Let's talk about a team who I would say are finding some good form. 15 goals in their last 4 games, all of which were wins. Only 4 against. LAFC doing some things, my friend.
Yeah, LAFC have been monstrous. I've been thinking about more and more how I rank these teams based off of how afraid I am ahead of the postseason. Like, which of these teams in my heart, if I'm an MLS fan of another team, right, which am I least excited, which am I most terrified to face in the playoffs? Miami has to be on that list somewhere, even as comically unbalanced as they are. LAFC might be my top pick, though, because you go through and watch what they're doing to, granted, a bunch of scrubs, right? I mean, in the last few games, it's been 4-1 wins over RSL, 2 of them, by the way. 4-2 win over San Jose. They beat St. Louis 3-0 over the weekend. These teams are not good, right? LAFC is carving through them. At the same time, they're carving through bad teams to a greater degree with more precision, maybe carving in some fun little shapes, maybe some Mickey Mouse ears or whatever along the way. They're like doing things with the knife that no other team in MLS has been doing with the knife this season. A lot of teams have beaten those teams I just named. They have not done it like LAFC are doing it. So I'm still maybe caveating all of this with they need to play some good teams. But man, it has been so much fun to watch this team play. Steve Trundle, it seems like, is falling more and more in love with this 3-5-2 setup with a single number 6. Over the weekend against St. Louis, it was Matthew Chouanier, who looked awesome. St. Louis caveat, obviously, but he looked awesome. And then 2 number 8s, Andrew Moran has been starting in the right-sided number 8 role. And then the front 2, where you've got Bouanga and Son playing up top together. I think that has been so effective. Again, bad teams, but man, the way that they're ripping through these folks is unbelievable. St. Louis passed the ball to Denny Bouanga on 1 goal. Okay, we'll set that one aside. But Son and his ability in tight spots has made this team better in possession. He can create those like pseudo transition moments that LAFC loves so much by drawing players into him when he has the ball because they think, oh, this is a great chance to go and pressure Son because his back's to goal and maybe we have numbers around him. And Son gets out of those spots in a way that most MLS players don't. And so then all of a sudden you're bypassed if you're St. Louis and you're dealing with Bouanga and Son racing right at your center backs. So there's been a lot of that for LAFC. I'm real scared. I would be real scared of them if I was any other team in Major League Soccer right now. And as a neutral, I am stoked that we get to watch Son and Bwanga score 17 consecutive goals for LAFC. No one else has scored in the last 5 games for them. No one else has scored in any of the last 17 goals. No duo in MLS history has ever done that before. I'm having a blast, fellas. I'm having a blast.
Joe, who is the team you've said it a couple times? Who is the team you would least like to face in the playoffs?
I mean,
East or West?
I think right now it's LAFC, but I mean, there are plenty of other nice contenders in there too.
All right, so Jeff, if Joe has it as LAFC is the team you'd least want to face, and we've already established DC United is the team you most want to face.
Well, they have to make the playoffs for that. But
where is Vancouver on that fear to positivity index?
I think they're very close to LAFC because I think that they've shown they can have that success with this sustained game model with various players coming in. And now you even see the opportunism coming in with Thomas Muller over the weekend against Seattle, right? Where you look at one of the goals, was it the equalizer or their opener? But one of the goals, like there's pretty much just like a sloppy second of possession by Snyder Brunel, who's getting a rare start, homegrown signing over the summer for the Seattle Sounders. Kind of lollygags in possession a little too long. Thomas Muller kind of pokes the ball off his foot, starts a counter, plays a pass up the seam to Brian White. Easy goal. And that is the sort of thing where it's like we don't think of Thomas Muller as being this kind of like pocket picker who is then springing counterattacks, but he has the intellect to conceptualize and visualize it. So he's doing more work than maybe we were giving him credit for when he came in as being like this quintessential poacher or kind of late arriver sort of guy who's just a clear line leader. So he's really bought in a huge way that's turned them into a very dangerous side where we aren't even really thinking about Ryan Gold anymore. I bring him up. We bring him up when we have these discussions, but I think when I'm thinking about what is Vancouver's ceiling this year, it's not predicated on whether or not Ryan Gold comes back like it was 3 months ago. On the flip side, though, if we're using the same scale, I think I'm suddenly dropping the Sounders a lot closer to the DC end, not like halfway even, but a lot closer to that side than I've been kind of giving them credit for throughout the season on the LAFC side. Because they keep talking a big game, right? And they keep saying we can hang with any of these teams, we can hang in any of these games. Obed Vargas telling me at the All-Star week we should be winning every MLS game 3-0 because we could hang with in-game model with Botafogo and PSG. I know, it's just, but like it rings in my head, like that is the atmosphere, and you could see it play out ahead of the League's Cup final, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have Lionel Messi, but we have Paul Rothrock, and they have to come to our house, and we are the soccer city, and all these things, where there was so much build up to that final. So much build up to that final that I think it would, and to say nothing about the afters and the fisticuffs and all that sort of stuff too. I don't think it's a surprise there's been such a big come down, but I'm really worried that it came at the worst possible time. And this again goes back to like one of my big gripes about the League's Cup. Teams that perform very well in the League's Cup do not perform well in the playoffs historically. We're 0 for 4 right now on teams even making it to the second round afterwards. And I think that when you look at Seattle, you're seeing a team that just looks tired. You're seeing a team that's making mistakes. You're seeing a team that when they have to rotate, maybe don't have those rotations ironed out as well as we thought. They're still scoring goals, but now here's the other thing. They're trying to integrate Jordan Morrison. And Jordan is a central figure for the Seattle Sounders historically. He hasn't been this kind of like peripheral figure since Clint Dempsey was still slinging it in 2017. So right now you're trying to bring him in when Jesus Ferreira has come in and taken a pretty dominant role within their attack, and Albert Rusnak has become the lead guy. And the only guy who's playing with freedom of the projected front four is Paul Rothrock, and he's the one who probably looks consistently the best because he's able to play with the least pressure. And so it's just like a lot to gel in a short time for a team that frankly has not performed up to expectations for the regular season specifically. Now, is there still time for them to iron it out? A little. But I'm suddenly wondering if they're not going to be as robust of an MLS Cup preseason pick for me as I assumed throughout the season, because it just hasn't actualized in the way that I expected against MLS opposition this season.
So that's the concern for Seattle. Joe, one additional question for you regarding our friends in Vancouver. We've seen Brian White returning from injury. He's played, I think, 30 minutes in one game, 30 minutes in this game. He comes on at halftime, scores a goal, subs back off with quote-unquote discomfort. Doesn't seem like it will be a major injury or anything like that. But if they were to miss him, if he were to pick up another injury and, say, miss the playoffs, how big of a loss is that for them? Can they replace him, or is that all she wrote for Vancouver?
I mean, that alone is not all she wrote for Vancouver. Danny Rios would be the starting number 9. He did start that game against Seattle. But it's part of
the
a
one who
much
subbed
larger...
off at halftime and didn't score?
Correct. I mean, Rios is a fine MLS player, but he's not Brian White, right? And Brian White is not Son, right? So there's levels to all of this, but it's part of a much bigger issue for Vancouver. I am cooler on them than Jeff is, not dramatically so, but just because of all the injuries. It's White, it's Gald, sure, we'll mention him here. Thomas Muller's been dealing with an adductor. I think it's adductor, not abductor. I always get them mixed up.
Yeah.
I think he's dealing with an adductor thing. He hasn't played more than an hour, really, in the last couple of weeks now, if memory serves. And then you get into the back line, and that's where things have been really messy. They're down 3 of their projected starters in the back line from opening day, where Sam Adekugbe's been out. He will continue to be out. Ranko Veselinovic is done for the season. Tristan Blackman might be done for the season, or he might make it back in time for the playoffs. We'll see. And then they brought in 2 center backs in the summer window because they're injured at center back. And those 2 guys are hurt. So I am real worried about Vancouver having the depth that they need to go out there and make a postseason run. Now, the upside for them is that they already made a deep run in a knockout competition with a bunch of rotated lineups, or at least partially rotated ones. That was the CONCACAF Champions Cup final, where Danny Rios started a bunch of those games, and there were some chopping and changings done from Jesper Sorensen. So they have depth, and Jeff, I think you mentioned something to that effect, and I do very much agree, and I believe in a lot of Vancouver's depth in a way that I don't believe in most teams' depth in MLS. The way that they're playing has been effective even when they've been handicapped a bit, but I'm worried that Vancouver are in the Columbus tier of, okay, yeah, they haven't had their results crater quite like Columbus just yet, but how long can you sustain results, and how long can you make it and survive with this sort of injury list? They've drawn their last 2 games, effectively dropped out of the Shield race in the process because they were still in contention. Lest we forget, at this time a week ago, it's been tough sledding for Vancouver recently.
So as long as we're talking the worry report, San Diego only 1 win in the last 5 points from 15 in that time period. They lose this weekend to San Jose.
Yep.
On a scale of 0 to 5, 5 being Ricky Puig tearing his ACL for the Galaxy, how worried are you about San Diego's playoff aspirations?
I mean, man, Ricky Puig tearing his ACL didn't do too much damage to the Galaxy's playoff aspirations at the end of the day. Now, did it? I do like the scales that we're developing here.
I think
like
you
the DC
understood
United
what
scale.
I meant. I think you understood.
I don't think San Diego need to be panicked.
Okay.
The West is pretty mid, all things considered. If we're using kid parlance, Jeff said aura today, so I could say mid. Jess also said fisticuffs and cahoots. What am I doing? Why do I not talk better than I do?
Timeless. My lingo is timeless.
So true. If I ever meet an 1800s mobster or whatever, I'm going to be ready to go. I do think San Diego are going to be mostly fine. I think they are still, along with LAFC, and maybe you want to put Vancouver in that category, maybe not. Seattle are on the fringes of this. They're in that top tier of teams to get out of the West, right? I think LAFC are in a class of their own right now. I might have San Diego second. And you've got a better chance of getting out of the West than you do out of the East. Really, the problem for San Diego over the weekend was that they just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. And you say, Joe, well, that seems pretty fundamental. Well, yes, it absolutely is. But really, around here, I believe that if you're creating a volume of chances, you're going to eventually convert one of those chances. And San Diego dominated San Jose. Like, so many chances went wanting. Ani Valakari had a golden opportunity that he puts just wide of the post. I mean, it was everybody in San Diego's squad. Just could not put the ball in the back of the net. They're creating looks. If I'm worried about this team, it's because of their defensive work still, and maybe that they're not elite in that way. But they're pretty good at everything, all things considered, San Diego. And I think that's probably going to be all that you need to get out of, or at least to make a deep run in the West.
All right. So that.
Speaking of the West, sorry Taylor to intervene. I'm looking at the table right now because Joe is kind of giving us a really good pecking order of strength, where it very much is like LAFC, San Diego, and then like I'm warmer on Vancouver, but like a lot of it is mire from there. There are 5 teams in the Western Conference with a positive goal difference right now. And every team has played at least 30 games. Most have played 31 or 32. You know the 5 by heart at this point if you've been listening to the show throughout the season. San Diego, Vancouver,
Galaxy,
Minnesota, LAFC.
That's
right, exactly.
Houston and RSL, I think.
Nailed it.
That's right. Ding, 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 ding across the board.
Getting good at this.
A lot of negatives in here. Like it is so wide open, and that's where you go back and you look at Vancouver. Well, if the injuries cost them, they will look back at a missed opportunity. Seattle, if they look back at not being able to kind of ramp back up ahead of the playoffs, they will see it as a missed opportunity. Whoever comes out of that bracket will be kind of exhaling a sigh of relief that they survived this one. But yeah, it has become a really messy fight at the top of the West.
Always love a really messy fight. Always love talking about teams that are out of playoff contention. Let's do one more break, and in part 3 we'll come back and we'll talk about Sporting KC, St. Louis City, and Atlanta United. Time permitting. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to depress some folks in Missouri and a little bit of Kansas, it seems, and maybe Georgia, time permitting. We'll see if they become the Matt Damon of our show. But, Jeff, if you could, we're going to start with Sporting KC, who have not had the best of seasons. Can you give us an abbreviated sort of summary of their campaign and what has gone wrong?
Yeah, so they make one really big move in the offseason, Dejan Joveljic. We'll talk about him in a second. But very much we're playing it back. This is a group that had been struggling visibly for a few years as constructed under Peter Vermees, but there was still a lot of trust the process, trust me bro sort of stuff going on. Well, they lose 5 of 6 to start the season. End of March, they finally say, it's time, Peter. Pack your things.
That feels like 8 years ago. Sorry, Jeff.
Doesn't it?
That feels like so long ago that happened. Please continue, but that blew my mind.
I had to look up the date because I was just like, I swear this happened in 2023.
Crazy.
But yeah, no, it is in fact March 31st. And since then, they have pretty much retreated like Homer into the bush, hoping that no one pays attention to the fact that they never conceptualized life without Peter Vermees. They have been actively, we're going to say with very generous phrasing, undergoing a CSO search on a timeline that is far slower than I think you would say any team really has. It's been 6 months. It has been 6 months now that they've been looking for a CSO, and they haven't appointed one. They went through the entirety of the summer window. One would think it would behoove you to hire someone before a summer transfer window, to have someone who's going to be part of building the future, making the decisions about the future roster. They did not do that. They also obviously have not hired a head coach because that is going to be the CSO's first job. And they had said by the end of the summer they had expected to have one. They then said it by the end of September. We are at the end of September, so unless we get some, while we're recording news coming in, they're going to miss that one too. I think it's just really interesting. Fans can feel very hard done by the fact that the team has pretty much punted on a couple of seasons, hoping that everything would round back into form under their man, and then clearly having absolutely no clue what to do if and when they had to let him go. There's a point where you almost have to relitigate the timing of the move, but I think it probably still made sense because of how dour the fan culture was after that, losing 5 of your first 6 and drawing the other one at home. It's gotten ugly. The one good thing that I could say about their season so far, Dejan Joveljic looks like a fantastic pickup. One of the first cash trade pickups of the nascent market that they have. $4 million. He scored 18 goals with really, really bad service and really bad support around him. That's phenomenal. You compare that to Emmanuel Latelat coming in for 22, and you can start to see where the MLS domestic market presents a lot of relative bargains because teams just don't know how to value these guys when they're selling with one another, right? It'll get there eventually, and I think maybe it'll be a little bit more like when you think about Serie A, a lot of great players will play for 2 or 3 different teams, and it's not seen as weird, but the fees are still competitive globally. I think that might be where eventually where it scales, where there is still movement because of how the salary cap and how other machinations in the league's rosters rule book will force teams to make decisions, but I would imagine those valuations are going to have to go up because if teams look around and say wait, you could get a Golden Boot contender for $4 million, I don't know why they would ever shop outside of MLS if they're one of the frugal bunches in the league.
From what I have heard and what I have read, it seems like a lot of the frustration with Sporting supporters is essentially that with this season, without a chief soccer officer, without any sort of progress being made in that department, it feels like, what are we playing these games for? Because if you have somebody coming in, you've identified them or you've already appointed them, now this season can be about can this youngster play? Can this 17-year-old handle significant minutes? Is this a center back pairing going forward, or should it be this center back pairing? And I think the frustration seems to be kind of bubbling up of what is the point of all of this if we don't have anybody in charge, we don't really know what we're building towards, we don't know what the philosophy is going to be. It feels like they're just kind of wasting time and still charging a premium for it.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's we paid these guys to kick a ball anyway, so we should probably have them do that even if we're not setting them up to be competitive or, again, productive towards the future, like you said. I think that fans have every reason to feel that at least Montreal said that they were giving up on the season and trying to rebuild and trying to assess the squad. And I know that I give them so much crap for that, but at least they owned it. This, again, retreating into the I hope you're not paying attention to me as we lose, let me count quick, 8 of our last 9 games dating back to mid-July and 9 of their last 11 since 2 weeks earlier, obviously. Yeah, it's it's really grim what's kind of happened to Sporting Kansas City, and you just hope that they can figure it out quick before they have some sort of like Chicago Fire-esque sort of walk through the wilderness of not really knowing where to go from here.
I totally sympathize with Sporting Kansas City fans and their frustrations about this season. At the same time, I don't think there should have been a single fan of Sporting Kansas City who was optimistic about 2025. And to wind back the clock a little bit, yes, they start the season under Peter Vermees. Yes, Jeff, I think the way you framed it makes a lot of sense of, hey, let's run it back. A lot of the reason why that they had to run it back is that their players aren't good and no one wants them. And even more than that, almost all the contracts on their senior roster expire at the end of this season. Like they could not get value to move players off of their books because no one wanted them. And so you have to basically bite the bullet. And yes, they made moves. It wasn't just Jovic that came in the winter. It was also Mano Garcia, their other DPs. So they added two DPs in the winter. Garcia has not been good. He's been injured for a chunk of this year.
I was focusing on a positive for them. They needed something.
Sure, fair enough. Is that SKC are terrible, and so Garcia isn't the Evander level superstar, whoever you want to go to elevate a group and to shine amongst the rubble, or is he just bad? I don't know. I think I lean towards him being bad, or at least being very ready to move on if I was the next CSO of Sporting Kansas City. But only
you
5
might be.
players.
They haven't hired one yet.
It's true. It's
it
possible.
Could be you.
Hashtag Joe CS Joe.
Hashtag hire CS Joe.
Something in there.
Yeah,
that is
something in there.
Joe's tag for people who are not watching on YouTube is hire CS Joe for purposes of today's recording. So
I think he's campaigning.
He's on brand.
I really do.
Joe, between you and Mesut Ozil's barber, which I believe DC United also spoke to, who do you think would be more capable and qualified?
I mean, I'd hire the barber. At least as a barber, you know you're adding some value to an organization. I'm not sure what value I'm exactly going to be adding here. It's Sporting Kansas City only have, I should let me say it present tense, 5 players on their entire senior roster whose contracts don't expire at the end of the season. The rebuild was always going to happen now. It was not going to happen in the summer. Jeff, your point's taken, by the way. It's taken them forever to hire a CSO. I think that's a valid point. Even if they'd hired someone, they weren't going to do much in the summer window. And before that, they weren't going to do much in the winter window because, again, their players are bad. They don't have a lot of value, and so you can't move on from them. Sporting Kansas City's 2025 season has been a waste. Effectively, it's been an exercise of watching the sand tick down from one half of the hourglass to the other. But that's what it is. And that's probably what it was always going to be because Peter Vermees, the CSO, let down Peter Vermees, the head coach. And now, as Jeff said, they're reckoning with, wow, we actually have to build out an organization. We have to go find people to work here because Peter Vermees isn't going to do all of that for us. It was always going to be painful. I do think, though, the SKC CSO job, a lot of letters in there, real alphabet soup right there from me. That's good stuff. I do think the SKC CSO, nailed it, job has...
In MLS.
In MLS. Oh, that's good. 9 letters. I think it has a lot of appeal, frankly, maybe more than it might sound like. And the reason for that is this is basically a blank slate. This is not quite an expansion team in terms of the roster flexibility that you have because they do have 2 DPs. Maybe they get off of Garcia, maybe they don't. I don't know. But it's darn close. Like one of the closest things we've seen to basically having a blank slate, and that is attractive to candidates. This search is pretty much over as far as I understand it. It's possible that they have someone finalized. They're moving through things now, finally, and it sounds like maybe we should get an announcement coming soon.
Was Peter Vermees the head of HR and payroll as well?
Right, so you got to get that higher, and then you do have to actually go and hire a barber, and then finally get to the CEO. It's a process, right? You got to work your way up the ladder. I think Sporting Kansas City fans should be pretty pleased with some of the names that I've heard about them hiring. I think they will hire a capable candidate, and I think fans will be pretty happy with who that is.
Joe, how pleased should St. Louis supporters be about the names they've been linked with to reset for St. Louis? They fired Olaf Melberg after just 15 matches in charge. They went 2-8-5, scoring only 11 goals, conceding 20. Sporting director Lutz Pfannenstiel dismissed in late August. Tactics regressed, as I alluded to in the intro. It felt like Melberg was kind of doing his own thing, not really doing what St. Louis had gone for previously. They aren't scoring many goals. They're still taking a lot of shots. They dropped lots of points from winning positions. I think 25 points after scoring first is how many they dropped. So how are we feeling about St. Louis next season, Joe, and the names they are linked with thus far?
Yeah, the fortunate thing for both these teams, SKC and St. Louis, is that the West is so murky. Like once you get past those 5 teams that Jeff mentioned with the positive goal differential, that it feels like all of these teams are one window away from, oh, wow, they're winning some games, and maybe they could hop above the playoff line. For St. Louis, they also have a lot of roster flexibility, and this ties to the question you asked me, Taylor, about the CSO stuff. They have a lot of room to wiggle. They only have 2 DPs right now, and one of them is João Klaus, who's out of contract with an option for next year. I mean, if you want to bring him back, he can't be as a DP. So I don't know what that option looks like. But you have to imagine that he would not be a DP for them next year. So they have top-end roster flexibility. They have not quite an SKC level of guys coming off of the books in general. But they have a lot of players in the senior roster that are going to be out of contract next year. That's a good thing because they need better players. And Olaf Melberg did a bad job in charge of this team. I watched every single game that he coached of this team, and they didn't seem to be able to progress the ball, and it didn't seem like there was real on-field clarity. At the same time, and classic TSS things can be two things fashion, Lutz Van den Steel let Melberg down, and before that let Bradley Cornell down after they burned so quickly, so fast, and so hard, and then burned out in all those same adjectives. The roster is just not very good, and so you need more talent. Now, some of the names, unlike with Sporting Kansas City, some of the names for St. Louis's CSO job have trickled out into the public sphere. One of them is Corey Ray, who was at Montreal, which I think we basically have to toss out that entire tenure because Saputo's, and before that he was with the Columbus Crew and helped build out their next pro setup. He's somebody that I've never heard someone talk bad of in MLS circles.
Same here.
Probably somebody out there. There's always somebody.
There's always someone.
I haven't found it yet. So Corey Ray seems like is regarded quite highly. The other two names, one of which is Lee Dykes, who I don't imagine many people know who that is. He is Brentford's technical director. And The Athletic has some really nice, at least one really nice write-up on him that I've read from a few years back. He seems like a really savvy dude, and generally hiring someone from Brentford feels like it's a pretty good idea.
Pretty
and then
smart,
the last name is the last name is John Hackworth, who has been in the front office. He's been a part of St. Louis City from, I believe, from the jump. Is someone that is, again, very well regarded around Major League Soccer. All of those names would fill me with some level of joy if I was a St. Louis fan. So I think there are things to look forward to. This season's been a complete fail, and we shouldn't just give them a total pass for that. I don't think we have. But there are reasons for optimism, and I think this is another one of those jobs that is pretty attractive in MLS circles.
Any other notes on St. Louis, Jeff, or should we decide not to bump Atlanta?
No, let's bump Atlanta. That sounds more fun.
We're not. We'll talk about Atlanta at least briefly. Maybe we'll end up talking more about them next week. But I want to talk a little bit about them at least.
Well, here, tell you what. I'll talk about Atlanta by talking about St. Louis. How's that?
Oh, boy.
I think that we've had a lot of expansion teams over the last decade, right? We're so sick of them that I think that we've just stopped talking about it. It is the story of MLS over the last decade. Aside the non-Lionel Messi, non-Apple story of MLS over the last decade has been rapid expansion. And all of these teams now, St. Louis was pretty much the last one. San Diego, I guess, actually doesn't count because they're infants. But like they are the most recent team now to go through a reinvention. And this first reinvention of an expansion franchise in MLS is so crucial. And it can cause some serious issues if you get it wrong. But it also can lead to such an obvious kind of sigh of relief and much better second iteration. We've seen some really good examples. LAFC obviously going from Bradley to Shrundalo is a little bit of a different category, right? Champagne selections and whatever. But it was a reinvention of going from high octane Showtime to this more like, tactically balanced. Everything was about balance with him at the beginning, and some people would argue by the middle of his tenure it was all about defense, whatever. New York City, we already laid it out. Nashville under BJ Callahan after Gary Smith. Minnesota, you could say when Allianz Field opened, but you could also say it when Eric Ramsey took over after Adrian Heath left. Cincinnati after the wooden spoon flop era, right? And then maybe we're seeing it with Austin now. There are ways that you can go about this where you understand what your strengths can be, you understand your market, you understand your ownership's expenditure, and you decide to lean into an angle. There are some teams that have really struggled with that. Atlanta is most infamous for this. I think that they are the very clear outlier of a team that just never really figured out what to do after its first act. But you look at Charlotte as well. Their timeline was so messy, if you remember, with all the coaches that they went through, and as Zoran Cornetta was kind of figuring out how to be a CSO. But Orlando is probably the second best example when you think of after Adrian Heath was fired, you had James O'Connor, you had Jason Kreis. It just was not working. It was some of the ugly stuff. And then eventually they get it right by bringing in Oscar Pereira and his back room, and it's gotten a lot better. St. Louis needs to kind of figure out what they want to do. They claimed coming into MLS they wanted to be a team that tapped into one of the biggest historical markets. I don't think they've done a good job of that whatsoever. I think they've been a really good landing spot for Germans who want to come to Major League Soccer. They've been better at that than St. Louis. So I think that if you look at what's the next iteration, I'm actually really intrigued by what John Hackworth could do, because I think that he understands St. Louis. He's been there for a couple of years, but he also understands American soccer at the youth levels. He's worked for U.S. Soccer, of course. He's also worked at a high level in the USL. I think that he is a very viable candidate for this thing. But it just depends what they want to be and how confident they are in what they want to be. the ownership group has shown some reluctance to kind of put their vision out there and try to like let Lutz be the face of it and the voice of it on the sporting side. But if they know what they're looking for in this next hire, they have a chance to do something really, really spectacular in the years to come.
All right. So potential optimism for St. Louis, potential optimism for SKC in that it's essentially a blank slate. Any optimism from either of you for Atlanta and where they are? Because they are a team that, truthfully, I thought were going to be a much stronger team. I thought were going to be in a much better position. I liked a lot of what they did, spent a lot of money. I didn't hate the managerial appointment, and yet worst start in club history, 2 wins from the first 11, lots of rotation in terms of approach and tactics and philosophy. Not a lot of consistency. It doesn't feel like certain players were placed into their ideal positions, and then even when they were, those around them were not, so you don't get the best results. It just feels like kind of a mishmash at this point, and a negative one since they are outside of the playoff picture.
Yeah, I mean, nothing has gone right for Atlanta this season. Think about all the swings that they made over the offseason. Hiring Ronnie Dyla. I don't think Dyla has much goodwill left in Atlanta when you look at the pieces that are there, and we'll get to the pieces in just a second. They're at least better than this, right? And there's been a lot of aimless crossing. There's not been a lot of clear strategic planning. And I still kind of believe that Ronnie Dyla will forget more about soccer than I will ever know. But it's been a tough watch for Atlanta this year, and not just for the aesthetics, like the things that don't look right in build-up and their final third over-reliance on crosses, where they're, I think, in the top 8 in MLS in crosses this season. A lot of those are aimless Brooks Lennon specials over on that right side. It's been bleak tactically, and the Dyla hire seemed like a fairly safe bet. It has not been, and that is maybe something that's going to come to an end sooner rather than later. We'll see. And then you look at the big-time roster moves that they made. They went out and added 2 DPs in the winter window, and Emmanuel Latelat and Miguel Almiron. I thought both of those players would be good in Almiron's case to great in Latelat's case. Latelat hasn't even been starting, and he's had a bunch of injury problems this year, but he has not been starting over Jamal Tiare, and Almiron has been basically nothing for this team, or at least close to it. For the entire season, he looks cooked at this stage. It's bad, because then you have Moranchuk, who we all knew wasn't going to be the guy this year. So you're hoping that Almiron and Latelat could do that heavy lifting. And it turns out that basically it was all just lipstick on a pig. And maybe even the lipstick wasn't that nice in the first place, where I still have Latelat stock. I think he's still really good. I'm not going to sell that stock. But he needs someone to pass him the ball. And it's not Moranchuk, and it's not Almiron, and the defense hasn't been good. They tried to overhaul in the summer window, but it was too little too late for 2025. So the question is, did Chris Henderson hit on the guys in the summer? Because there are a bunch of changes that need to be made. They need to figure out how to get out of at least one of their DPs. I'd imagine that given their spending power, and if you're looking for a reason for optimism, here it is. Given their spending and how willing Arthur Blank's been to open the checkbook, it won't be impossible maybe for them to take a bath on a DP transfer-wise, but still get out of one and open up a spot to do something higher up the field. But man, the bit parts haven't been good, the stars haven't been good, the tactics haven't been good. If we're doing the short summary on Atlanta United, there it is, folks.
Joe, how surprised would preseason Joe be to learn that Almiron and Moranchuk would have the same number of goals and assists, and Latelat would have fewer than that, and none of them would have above double digits?
Yeah, surprised. Because, again, I thought Almiron would not be the same Almiron that we got before in Atlanta, before he went to Newcastle, but I thought he would still be a very capable MLS player. And maybe he has been, like maybe capable MLS player is exactly what he's been. That's not enough, right? 9 goal contributions with some mediocre underlying number. It's not enough out of a guy that you paid that much for, out of a guy that you're paying that much in a DP spot. And Moranchuk was a huge miss before the new regime came in. They've been trying to deal with that, but they just added more misses to all of that. And to go even deeper down the field, Brad Guzan has been their regular starter in goal right up until he got benched a month and a half ago. Brad Guzan's past it at this stage. He's 41 years old. Seems like a great guy. It's past time. Like, that's another decision that was not hit this year. Too many pieces just have not been good enough. Too many players aren't up to the level, and that's a really difficult one to get out of, because unlike some of the teams that we've talked about already, they don't have the same, at least all these bad players are out of contract starting now. They've got a lot of guys under contract through next year, or through 2027, 2028. They've got Steven Alzate, who they brought in, the number 8 that they brought in from England. He's on contract till 2030. They have made a lot of bets on themselves across multiple regimes, and the current regime is trying to wait for the old bets that were made by the past regime to expire so that they can go and make more bets themselves. But are the bets that they made in the summer and back in the winter really panning out? They're not. It's real messy in Atlanta right now.
Yeah, and I think you look at the latte loth of it all too, and I'm wondering if he just can't handle being the pressure of being a record signing or being the guy, right? Like, because I think that he was very important at Middlesbrough, but he was playing in a transition system where he was getting much more collect the ball and carry it upfield. 18% of his carries went at least 5 yards closer to the opponent's goal in the championship. This year, that's down to 12%. So he's just not finding space to be able to dribble, and that's something that seems to build confidence. When you look both in his final championship season and his MLS season, that's a very similar sample size, both around 1,900 minutes. He's taking a similar number of shots, about 2.5 with a rounding error in either direction from last season to this season. In the championship, he was putting 45% of those on target. This year, it's 31%. And that just, like, it's either a guy, like, reaching for chances, his shot distance is similar, so maybe he's just shooting from weird angles, kind of forcing it. But he's not getting those sort of clear looks that he was able to place on target in the same way, and I'm wondering if those are the goals in stride that we sort of envisioned him scoring more of when he watched his highlight package, or if you watch Middlesbrough in the championship last year. So I don't know if he's going to get that game state under Ronnie Deila, is the hard part, and so you have to start making some decisions here. But given the outlay for it, you need to make it work with Latte Loth. You need to make it work with Miguel Almiron too, but you kind of have an obligation if you're going to go out and make a record signing to make it count, right? And if you don't, then that is going to be a part of the legacy, and he'll join the Insignes and the Shaqiris on the list of the worst DPs of all time. But it's way too early for that. It's just so clear that the coach is not setting the record signing up for success here, and it's so clear that the record signing does not have that sort of like gamesman, like, I guess I've just got to embrace it, adapt my skill set to this and make it work. And right now it's just been so ugly to watch. You said that they had won 2 of their first 11. Well, I'll go one step further. They've only won 5 of their first 31 games of the season. And that's just not enough for Atlanta United.
All right, question for you both. Starting in goal next season, is it anybody that is currently on the roster? Brad Guzan is out of contract at the end of this campaign. Josh Cohen is out of contract, but the club has a 1-year option.
Yeah.
Do we see either of them playing for this team next season?
No, but I do see Jaden Hibbert, who's been the one starting all the games that Guzan hasn't started. 21-year-old Canadian international. I think he will be the guy for them next year. Inexpensive. They need more of that. They need roster space to go and do other stuff higher up the field. I think betting on a young rising goalkeeper with a pretty bright future is a safe one.
I think he's also... I'm looking at Transfermarkt now. So his deal expires December 31st, 2025, but there's a club option for 3 years. That's a good deal.
Nothing like a young domestic player in Major League Soccer. Yeah, I'll join Joe in that one. If they wanted Josh Cohen to stick around and be the starter, I think they would have given him starts by now. He hasn't played a minute in MLS this year. I don't really get it. I always thought that there was higher upside than what we've seen right now, but maybe we'll see it somewhere else. I don't know.
Jamal Tiare, he is out of contract. He has a 1-year option. Do you exercise that option if you are Atlanta?
I don't know what his salary is, but assuming it's not absurd, yeah, Tiare has been solid for them. I think he's a very capable rotation starter or a nice backup in MLS. Like, there are some pieces in here. There's just a lot of dead weight that they need to figure out how to clear, and there's a lot of players that are still mostly unknowns that we just don't have a good read on yet.
Where is Brooks Lennon on the deadweight scale? I'm just asking you all types of scales and survey questions.
Brooks Lennon is the name for the bottom of the deadweight scale.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, he kind of enables the worst traits in Ronnie Deila's tactics. It looks a lot like when you look at a Manchester United squad and it's 5 different managers, players, all kind of hanging out in the same lobby. That's what this roster is right now. And so someone needs to just pick a lane, commit to it, and maybe be good enough to stay in the job for more than a year and a half. And good things could possibly happen then.
Peter Vermees to Atlanta United it is. I'm glad we solved that one. Nicely done, gentlemen. Nicely done, Jeff Reuter. Thank you for all of your insight and observations today, my friend.
Yes, of course.
Hire a CS Joe Lowry, the same to you.
Thanks, Taylor.
And listeners, thank you all so much for listening. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next week when we take a look at some teams that are rounding into playoff form that we have enthusiasm for. Is that the next plan?
And the Red Bulls, where we roast the Red Bulls one more time.
Oh, I look forward to it. Speak to you then. Bye-bye for now.